Now, when we talk about form for Mark, a lot of what we deal with is that upper cross syndrome.
Upper cross syndrome. Not a real syndrome, by the way. This is make-believe PT bull.
A lot of that little slouch that all of us are developing.
All of us are not developing a slouch.
From the sedentary lifestyle or the texting, right?
Texting does not promote. Folks, posture is the single biggest cesspool of bull ever. Posture is mostly genetic. It has almost nothing to do with muscle strength. It's just how you usually sit. If you want better posture, check this out. Just be attentive of it, sit more upright, and over several weeks, you'll learn to, by default, sit more upright. There's no exercise you need to do in the gym. Nobody has bad posture because their pecs are too strong and their back is too weak.
I might not be as direct as Dr. Mike here, but I agree with his overall stance. Upper cross syndrome was a theory proposed by a medical doctor and researcher, Vladimir Janda, in 1979. 40 years later, and it still hasn't been validated, and that's even admitted on his website. Don't stress about these made-up conditions. If you're really worried, just be less sedentary, try to walk more, and incorporate a well-rounded exercise routine.
There is so much absolutely ridiculously wrong about that there's not even a word to categorize it. First of all, posture is the position from which movement begins and ends. If you begin a movement in the wrong position, it's very unlikely you will ever do the movement with good structural alignment and proper biomechanics, which means you're going to increase the wear and tear and likelihood of injury significantly. When you look at the alignment of the human body when it's optimal, if you stand up in good posture, head over shoulder, shoulder over hip, hip over knee, knee over ankle, which is just a standard structural alignment that we should be to optimize our ability to deal with gravity, the joints of the body are in a relatively neutral position. If you have forward head posture, then your cervical spine's already flexed, your thoracic spine's already flexed, and you're going to have a change in the position of the pelvis and the whole body. The pelvis often moves forward, so your weight distribution is disrupted, which means load bearing is disrupted, which means you have changed what's called the optimal instantaneous axis of rotation in a joint. For example, when your shoulder is moving in the socket, like a pitcher throwing a baseball, a professional pitcher's arm, shoulder will move at 7,000 degrees a second. So if you take your arm around in a circle, if you do that one time in 1 second, that's 360 degrees. If you do it 2 times, then it's 720. Professional pitcher's shoulder will move at 7,000 degrees a second. So that rotator cuff has to move that humerus in the socket and keep it perfectly aligned so it's not banging into the acromion and damaging the labrum and ruining the shoulder joint, which means that the brain and the nervous system and the motor system has to maintain that dynamic motion at the optimal axis of instantaneous rotation, meaning it has to keep it in the right place at the right time regardless of what speed. That's dynamic posture. Static posture is how you sit or even how you stand, or if you're doing a bent over row, the static posture of your torso and your legs is the start position or the working position of the exercise, and the dynamic posture is the working aspect of your arms. If your arms are in a faulty position, it can increase your likelihood of injury. So to say that posture is bullshit is like saying I have no knowledge whatsoever of anatomy, kinesiology, physiology, or even psychology. Posture is very relevant to communication. 55% of all communication is not by voice, it's by posture and gesture. And we all know, for example, when someone stands like a sad sack, that they're not in a happy state. And we don't see people slouching that look sad that are smiling. When you smile, your body goes upright. If you look at the book Somatics by Thomas Hanna, he gives you some great examples. I could give you 100 books on posture. So we have that one issue. Now, from an exercise perspective, there's 3 phases to every exercise: setup, execution, and follow through. If your setup or posture is incorrect, your execution will be incorrect, and so will your follow through, and your likelihood of injury and unnecessary wear and tear goes through the roof. How do I know? I've rehabilitated hundreds of the world's best athletes. If you look into who I am and what I do and the books I've written and the institute that I own, you'll find plenty of evidence of just exactly that. In fact, Kobe Bryant was a client of mine, so there's just one of many names I could give you. Now, this whole upper cross thing, that's another thing that is being misunderstood out there. And by the way, his name's not Janda, it's Yanda. And he happened to be one of my greatest teachers. I studied all of his training. I did an advanced training in the the Czech Republic in the Charles Hospital where he worked. I also worked with Karel Levitt, who was his teacher. These guys were the geniuses of their era, and I don't know of anybody that succeeded their research. Now, if you understand anatomy, then let's get down to basics. The human muscular system and muscle system has three types of muscles: smooth muscles, such as your heart and some of your internal organs, and then your phasic and tonic system, so your structural striated skeletal muscles. You have the phasic system, which moves the body and is predominantly fast twitch, or has more fast twitch than slow twitch, and the tonic system, and this is well researched and you can find it in good anatomy books. The tonic system has an aerobic metabolism, a lower threshold of stimulation, and is more designed to do long-term work, and the tonic system is what is used for holding the body's posture and is largely involved in stabilizer functions. So all the joints have to be stabilized. Now, if you look at the research on tonic and phasic muscles, the research shows conclusively that tonic muscles are facilitated by overuse, underuse, abuse, such as trauma, or disuse. And when a tonic muscle becomes facilitated, the threshold of stimulation drops down and the muscles become hyperactive. They take on more and more work. If your head goes forward, your tonic muscles will turn on. Your trapezius and neck extensors, for example, are tonic muscles. Your head weighs 8% of your body weight. So every inch your head moves forward, it adds the weight ahead of the head again to the neck extensors. So if your head's 2 inches forward, and 3 inches forward is not uncommon, 6+ centimeters. I did tests with calibrated instruments that I've invented at Los Angeles Chiropractic College and found after 2,300 measurements, the average person's forward head carriage was 6.2 centimeters or 6.3 centimeters. It's been years since I did the research, but it was over 6 centimeters. That means that that person's carrying tremendous chronic load on their neck extensors, which will cause the tonic muscles to shorten and tighten, the phasic muscles, such as the sternocleidomastoid, to lengthen and weaken, which will disrupt the kinetic chain from top to bottom. So when it comes to upper cross syndrome and lower cross syndrome, you're dealing with the balance of tonic phasic muscles. If you look at what I've just said and you spend some time clinically and use goniometers and actually measure bodies, and I've invented calibrated systems to measure forward head posture, first rib angle, pelvic tilt, etc., which all CHEK professionals are taught to use, you can identify clearly that very few people out there of any walk of life have normal posture, mostly to sitting all the time and bad diet and bad lifestyle practices. So that's a solid fact, and I'm a guy who's measured countless thousands of people's postures to the letter. Whenever you don't have good posture, your biomechanics are not normal, your weight distribution is not normal, and your ability to deal with the force of gravity is not normal, and that accelerates further muscle imbalance. You don't have to have scientific research to see what is obvious just by looking around you. That doesn't even go into the emotional aspects. If you look at the rates of anxiety, for example, that's one thing, and the rates of people that have unhealed trauma, you can do a breathing pattern evaluation and identify that many of these people have an inverted breathing pattern, which means when they inhale, instead of their abdominal muscles relaxing so the diaphragm can drop down, which requires the organs to drop down and the belly to expand, they tighten their muscles, because that's called a fear response. So when someone has unhealed trauma, they hold their abdominals chronically tight, like bodybuilders tend to do to try to get everybody to look at them. And that's another reason for emotional stress, because they're needing attention. So what happens is your abdominal muscles stay too tight, which pulls the chest down and draws the head forward. And again, you have this postural disruption. You have an upper cross syndrome. Whenever you have an upper cross syndrome, it gives birth to a lower cross syndrome. Lower cross syndrome gives birth to an upper cross syndrome. Now, to say that this is not proven simply means that people have not done proper research. And unfortunately, having read thousands and thousands of research studies in my 40-year career rehabilitating the best athletes of the world and many, many other types of people from all walks of life, I can tell you 95% of the research out there isn't worth the paper it's written on, because the people doing the research don't know enough about the human body, anatomy, kinesiology, physiology, relevant sciences, to actually know how to design a research study, let alone design exercise programs to test that are properly designed. And I've demonstrated this thousands of times in my lectures all over the world. This concerns me deeply. because one guy's got rehab on his name, and that shows me you don't understand rehabilitation. The other guy is telling you things that are absolutely not true. I highly doubt he has the knowledge to even tell you the truth about posture. He wouldn't be saying such ridiculous things at all. So these are things that deeply concern me, because I hate seeing the public get terribly misled by people that masquerade as experts but really do not have the knowledge or probably the clinical skills and just read stuff and believe it. Anybody that's ever gone through my institute would easily be able to refute this, even at the lowest level of training. I highly recommend all of you listening to this look at my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, where I have given layman's explanations for many of the relevant things we're talking about here today. Those of you using the internet need to be very careful, because you're easily misled by people that look like you may want to look and sound cool, but don't really know what they're talking about. And that is very, very important. So I hope you learned something from this, and I hope the two of you that made this video do a lot more study, and you can easily start with my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. You can look at my book, The Golf Biomechanics Manual. You can look at my book that I wrote with Lee Brandon, The Tennis Biomechanics Manual. You can look at my book, Movement That Matters. And you can also go to the CHEK Institute, CHEK Institute, and look at a myriad of articles and online courses. And I've written articles in Muscle and Fitness and many other magazines. If you search my name on the internet, you can find lots of stuff going right into this in great detail. So thanks for joining me today.